Welcome to episode 4 of Takers and Trailblazers, Women in Insurance podcast. Here we delve into the dynamic world of insurance and insurtech through the lens of women's experiences. And we tackle topics from imposter syndrome to burnout. I'm Diane, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Tanya, Helen, and Jen. And today we are so thrilled to have Dr. Christy Lane on the podcast. Christy is a global insurtech, analytics, and digital health expert. Her expertise lies in wearable devices, data science, insurance, pharma, rehabilitation medicine. I could go on, but her latest venture, Flora, is pioneering the first direct-to-consumer fertility benefits product. It's poised to revolutionize accessibility to fertility coverage. And while I had the pleasure of meeting Christy at Amplify last year, delving into her background a little bit for this introduction left me in a little bit of awe. So trust me, her achievements surpass what I'm rambling on about here. So go check out her LinkedIn page after watching this podcast. And I urge you to follow her and stay connected. So welcome, Christy.
Thank you. Really excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you.
So, Christy, tell us a little bit about your background.
I started out my career as an academic, so I've been doing clinical research longer than I would like to admit because it makes me feel old, but since the late 90s, and then became a professor here in Calgary in 2009, but had always been really interested in health outcomes and predictive analytics and things. And so in 2013, on maternity leave, we can probably get to that, I started my first company called Viva Metrica, and that was it was meant to be a digital health company. We were taking data from wearable devices to understand risk of disease and mortality. And as insurance women, you can probably guess that ended me up squarely in insurtech for the last decade. So we were working with carriers and reinsurers on primarily life insurance underwriting, but also engagement and wellness. And as part of that, I ended up moving to Silicon Valley for about 6 years. And that's when I was at Stanford as a visiting professor in the School of Medicine there and started the Wearable Health Lab that I still do research at, and sold that company in 2020, which is great. And then had been doing some consulting work across digital health, insurtech, and a little bit of pharma. I really am at that like crossroads intersection of insurance and digital health is where I like to spend my time, and can kind of talk about the genesis story of Flora if you want, but that's how I ended up starting Flora. I have been working in, like I said, at insurtech and digital health, and really looking at where those things dovetail. And along the way, I mean, I have 3 kids. You can probably see the pictures in the background. And I was in school forever. Okay, I was in university forever. And by the time I got out and got married, I was like, okay, I'm early 30s, I'm ready to have kids. And it just did not work out that way. And as a type A planner, that was not a happy time. But I ended up needing fertility treatment for 2 of my 3 kids. And honestly, it was like the worst. It was isolating. This was like 10, 13 years ago. Nobody was talking about it. Nobody was even really, openly, even between women, right? Like I later found out I had girlfriends, friends, colleagues going through it. Nobody was talking about it. And so, at the time thinking this is emotionally isolating, but it was also financially tricky. And I mean, we were fine, 2 professionals, but I mean, there are lots of women who don't even seek treatment because they don't have the funds. So about 2 years ago, I was introduced to Laura, who's my co-founder, Laura McDonald at Flora. And she had also been thinking about, there have to be better ways to financially support women and also create community around women going through fertility treatment. So that was the genesis of it, my personal story and passion for women's health, but also understanding that there's a big gap there, the big insurance opportunity.
Yeah.
crazy that even in the time we are now, it's still something that's not talked about a lot. And, you know, when you're in the midst of it, I've gone through my own struggles, you start to hear about it more. But I just actually joined a new group of ladies in like a book club, and we sat around one day at a kitchen table and realized every single one of us had a
Oh my
fertility.
God.
You're like, what? How did we all come together? It was crazy, but it
Well,
happens. We know.
it's not surprised. It's the stat is 1 in 6.
Yeah.
And you know, it's in many parts, some like older women, the older you get, the higher the chance you're going to need some kind of treatment. And so, especially in like an insurance environment, lots of people with lots of education who are women who are waiting till later in life to have babies, you know, the risk goes up. And so the needed support goes up as well.
And I think like, you probably see a lot of the, you know, the financial aspect of it. Cause you know, obviously we all know someone has had friends and, you know, it's not just one time investment per se. This could be multiple times, right? Multiple tries, right? And
100%.
in some cases, and if I guess that's on the more extreme case, or even to the less extreme case, you know, I guess even just support in general, right? Like that's kind of going off into a different topic, but mental health support or you know, medication or whatever it is outside of just, you know, some of the bigger things that work, right?
Yeah. Well, 100%. And I think a lot of it's around creating that community of women who so people do have someone to talk, and men. So people do have someone to talk to. You know what the resources are. You also know that it's normal and it's natural what you're going through,
Yep.
right? Because there's
Normalize it, right?
Take away the shame factor.
It's taking
Yeah.
away the shame, and that's where the privacy is. Like you're too afraid to open
Yeah.
up about it. Mhm.
I was gonna mention, or my thought process when you said as you get older, and we're seeing it in more older women, you know, as we are all professionals, women on a good day, the thought process is that, again, we look at society and women that have worked to get where they are, right? They've put their family planning, their ability or want or need to have children earlier. You know, if we looked at different not time zones, but time frames in life, right? Previously, women were having their babies at 21. That's not the case today.
Yeah.
Right. So that's I think the trend that's happened, right? Women are now seeking more face time in the workforce, which is part of why we're all together, you know, to talk about, you know, the C-suites, the executives, your leadership, right? We put everything else on hold to get where they are today. And then now they're experiencing fertility, you know, concerns, issues, problems, needing some assistance. And that's where something like yourself has come into play, which is here to support them, which is fantastic, right? Filling the need.
I think it's also a
Very
liberator for women, because I remember having a discussion with my husband, and I told him I need to wait to have kids. Like I really want to develop my career, but that would put me into my late 30s. And I was like, there's going to be a risk, you know, are we prepared for that? And what's our plan A, plan B, plan C? And there was always a lot of anxiety in the background. I really want this family, but I don't want to sacrifice this other really important side of my wants as well. But having this option of fertility insurance available, especially when you're in your 20s, your early 30s, and you are building a career or you haven't found someone you want to have,
Right.
whatever, like whatever is happening in your life that you're just not there. I really think it's a liberator. I do.
I love that. I mean, and I completely agree. It's really, you know, we've heard quotes, women who've said, you know, right now they're banking their eggs or freezing their eggs as an insurance policy. But I mean, this is an actual insurance policy where, you know, you may not need it. You may wait until your late 30s and conceive naturally, and it's fine, but you may not. So I love that, Tanya, way of thinking about that it's also, like you say, liberating, where it gives ownership, the financial freedom and also the career life decision freedom for women to choose to wait or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Can we talk about, or can we share with the audience, you know, we've heard you say it's an insurance program. Again,
Yeah.
I've done my research, so I know what it means, but can we just quickly talk about or tell the audience what the insurance piece is that they
Yeah.
potentially are insuring?
Yeah, 100%. So it's the first individually owned fertility insurance. And so it's truly insurance. We're selling this to women between the age of 20 and 40 who have no known infertility.
Okay.
So if you already have existing infertility or you're already gone down the path of seeing a specialist, you're undergoing treatment, there are other solutions for that, loans and financing. This is truly insurance. So you're aiming to buy it before you know you're going to need it. And it's low monthly premiums. And then in the event that you do end up needing treatment for infertility, whether that's drugs, IUI, IVF, we'll cover the cost of that up to certain annual and lifetime maximums.
Wow.
Perfect. Thank you. I just thought
Yeah.
we keep using the word and really wanted to give the audience the true benefit and you the opportunity to really talk about your product, of course, but know what it truly is.
Yeah, and I would say what's interesting is in the market, there are some group benefits products, but back to the accessibility piece, they're really only accessible through Fortune 500 companies because they're very expensive. So a lot of professional women have access to this, but again, they have certain limitations. They're not portable. They have maximums. So really we're looking to solve this problem for the Gen Z, the gig workers, women, individual contractors, or even just women who are in a Fortune 500 job, but maybe want to move at some point and still have coverage.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing.
I think it really does do what you just mentioned is it gives the woman the opportunity and the true decision-making power to go, I don't have to be rushed. I don't need to hit the stigma of, oh my goodness, you're 35 and you haven't had your kids yet, or 40 and haven't had your children yet. I think it really does give that gift and that empowerment back.
I remember being 27 and my doctor saying, you need to have whatever kids you want to have by the time you're 30. So here I am. I got married very, very young. And we are, right? Been married for, I think 3 years or at that point. And yeah, that's what I was told. And I mean, I knock wood, I guess everything worked out okay. But that I remember feeling that pressure, right?
Yeah.
And that was my GP, been my GP since I was 12. And that's what she said.
I was the exact same age, 27, when I was told I had old eggs.
Wow.
Wow. Did you punch her?
Well, I think fortunately, at least it was on the radar of those doctors because a lot of the time it's just not. And then you're kind of in the position where you're like, why didn't anybody tell me about this? Like for me, I was 33, I think, when I really started trying. And even as a women's health researcher, I just had no knowledge of it. I was like, this is just going to happen. It might take a while, but anyway, so it's a lot about the education as well. And that's what we're looking to do at Flora is educate women, especially younger women around, the reality. Yes, there are risks. The longer you wait, the higher the risk that you're going to need some kind of treatment, but also, tens of thousands of women are having happy, healthy babies in their 40s.
Yes.
I mean, I had, again, maybe too much information. I'm 45. I have a 3-year-old. So I was 42 when I had him, and it was didn't need treatment for that one. So, it's happening. And for women to know that, I think is really empowering too, helping them understand, we're going to try and help you and be there with you on your journey, whatever that journey looks like.
Nice. So I have a question about, so your last business, with the wearables and that life that you had, I know you had talked about your own experience influencing Flora, but how did that other business venture and kind of lead you? Did you feel like there were stepping stones and things that led you into Flora from that past experience in life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from a scientific perspective, for sure, and I can talk about that, but also just from a experience in building a venture-backed business. You know, there are a lot of lessons. So we could do many podcasts on all the lessons learned from that first business. But I would say both have the commonality of leveraging a deep understanding of clinical data to understand risk.
Yeah.
So my first business was taking wearable data, things like physical activity, nutrition, sleep, to understand risk of mortality and disease. And in this case, it's really the same principles of understanding. A lot of the piece that I bring to Flora is understanding how do we use what data out there exists to understand risks for infertility and risks for usage of treatment. And so, yeah, I would say there's that piece. It really is similar in many ways, just with a different outcome. But absolutely, you know, if you ask my husband, he told me I wasn't allowed to do, not allowed, but you know what I mean. I wasn't allowed to do another startup.
Yeah.
I was the CEO of my last business, and it was a lot. Like we can get into talking about, you know,
Yes.
work-life balance and all of those family challenges. It was a lot. And so I think a lot of what I learned from that were mistakes not to make again, and that I'm very thoughtfully not making now with the new business.
So what are those mistakes?
Yeah, let's get into that. Let's deep into that.
I mean, like the biggest one for sure is balance. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I have perfect balance in my work-life balance. I don't, but it's way better. I would say, you know, that business I started 10 years ago, you know, on my maternity leave. So I was on mat leave from being a professor. I was like, okay, let's take this time and, you know, start this business. And then pretty much immediately moved my whole family to California. My poor husband had to quit his job so that we could go down, and I was at Stanford. And I mean, it was amazing and I learned a lot, but it was also very stressful. And I would say I was always on, like always, always, always. If we're on a road trip somewhere, we're away and, you know, on vacation, there's very few times that I wasn't like mentally plugged into what was going on with the business or on my phone. And, you know, I regret that. Like I had a little baby. My husband took the year off instead of me, got to spend that time with my first daughter from when she was 1 to 2. And I was around. I mean, I'm not saying we didn't spend a lot of time together, but it was different. And I would say that's a big learning. I'm very purposeful, I would say, with my time management now. And when I'm on vacation, not answering Slack, not looking at my email. And I feel like I think it's good personally, but I also think it's good for the business.
Yeah.
That's an interesting insight for sure.
Yeah.
I'm a classically trained musician, and so I always tell people the trick to not like being able to either memorize a piece or like a really difficult passage is step away from it for a day. Just if you keep practicing it, you're not separating yourself from the problem. You're not giving yourself time to think about it. And so step away from it. It's counterintuitive, right? You just think I have to keep working. I can't solve. Step away from it, do other things. And it's like almost this miracle that happens when you get back to it. And I think it's the same in business. Like whenever
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
I love that. And I totally find that sometimes the hardest problems are like, you have to walk away, like go for a walk, go just do something else, like, you know, take your mind off it. And then often the solutions come around when your brain has a chance to relax. So
I always used to say, I think the best in different places in my career. I would always think the best, walking the dog, TMI, in the shower. Because
In the shower. No,
Shower is
100%.
science backed. It's science backed because you're in an area that's taking
Right.
away all periphery stimulation.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's me too. I come up with the best marketing ideas in the shower. I'm like, oh yeah,
Me too. Yeah. I'm like, oh, yeah. Solving the world problems in the shower.
There's something here. There's like a deeper dive.
Next podcast may not be in the shower, just to put it forward.
I love it.
That's my hardest thing though, is breaking away. I feel like I have almost addiction. Like
I will say, Diane, you do.
I know.
I work with you.
When I was in Jamaica, I promised I was not going to bring my laptop, and I didn't. But there were some days when it was like, oh no, everyone's still asleep. Okay, I'm just going to go sign into Teams and catch up on some things. And I mean, I was sitting on a beach and I had a coffee, but I was in there and I was like, I couldn't even do it for a week.
I know.
Is it really though, that you're addicted? Because I agree, I'm also addicted, but there's also that point, and I don't think we've gotten there yet, and I'm getting better with the help of you gals and what we're doing with the podcast and finding different ways to talk about our concerns, our issues, and all of those things. It's realizing that I don't have to reply. The guilt that I feel if I don't reply or I don't do XYZ in a timely manner. We've talked about that, right? Is we hear that ping and our instant is, oh my God, I got to answer it. And if I don't answer it, someone else is going to answer it faster than me.
Yeah. Well, and you think about, like, it's wild to me when I reflect on even like, early days, like your early university, I would say. But if you think about prior generations and how they worked, I mean, obviously work's a lot more efficient and I would say easier now, but you would leave work,
right?
That'd be it. You'd leave your desk and you'd go home and you'd do whatever, and the weekend would come.
Yes.
And you deal with it Monday morning.
People didn't have, a way to reach you.
Yeah, there's so many times I say multi-million-dollar businesses, billion-dollar businesses were built 20 years ago when there was no email on phones, when there was no, I remember my mom coming home from, I guess if you were in a night class, or I remember my mom maybe bringing home some textbooks, and we had like the family computer, but like, no, that was it. There wasn't this constant level of hookup. And I think part of like what we were just saying before, like, I also think there's something to, like, with the whole logging in from the beach thing, there's also something addicting about not like being fake on vacation, but then when you're on the beach and you're having the coffee and you kind of log in because everybody else is still sleeping, it's like, wow, this is actually nice. Like you're working on some ideas. You're like, it's a different level of work. It's not.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's even healthy or not. I'm just saying that it does seem to be like, I love those work days where I can just be like, I'm fake vacation right now.
I call those days I'm working, but I'm working incognito. I'm here, but I'm not here. You can't find me. I'm just working in silence.
Two reasons why I refuse to work on vacation. It sends a bad message to my team members.
Yeah, totally.
It's that you're expected to work on your vacation because your leader is working on your vacation. And I don't want that. I don't want my team members to feel like they're not relaxing or totally putting the business side of their life away. And the second reason is when I'm away and can't solve their problems, it makes them better because they have to solve it without me.
Yeah.
So those are it took me 10 years to learn that. And I had to suffer really bad burnout in 2020 to like appreciate how important that is. But yeah, and if it's an emergency, guess what? They're going to call me.
Yeah.
So unless I get, and there are times where of course they did call me, but yeah, it's never life or death. That's the thing.
Yeah. I just finished and preluding to our next guest, not to take anything away from Christy, is Tinsley talks about that in her book when we get to talk about her next week. So we will have that conversation about the signing off and really how it impacts you day to day.
Yeah.
I think, Christy, something you said I think is really interesting that I would love to ask you is so I think, so in that vortex of all in, every day, all day, no balance, no boundaries, whatever, to Flora, to where you've really, come out of this and you're really putting that stuff in. Like, do you, in your experience, in your hearts of hearts, do you think that you can have a successful business and put those things aside? Like, are we just telling ourselves that it's all in and this is what it takes and it's a 80-hour a week, blah, 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 when really that's probably coming and stemming from a whole lot of other areas in terms of growth, emotional intelligence, all these types of things. So I'd love your opinion on that, like then versus now.
I mean, I think absolutely yes. And for a couple of reasons. I think it's all of the studies, like if you look at all of the research studies, they show that people can only really concentrate and work productively for limited periods of time. Like
Yeah.
even when you think about, as a professor, I read all the things about teaching and it's so true. It's 20 minutes. 20 minutes at a time is really all people can do. So, I mean, I think from that perspective, that's part of it. But I also think it's that when you want to be focusing and being productive when you're working on it, as opposed to just this like hustle culture of being busy means you're productive.
Yes.
Exactly.
And I've had people that I've worked with in the past who were very busy, but literally didn't add anything of value. Right. Where they're just like always on, always working. But when you look at like what's actually being delivered and what value's being added, it was very limited. And so I think that's part of it too. And I mean, admittedly, I got really caught up in that hustle culture 5 to 10 years ago, where it was, you kind of felt like if you were in the venture-backed startup space, you had to be. And I mean, that culture still prevails quite a bit. I would like to say that it's hopefully changed a little bit. I think COVID, in some ways, the pandemic was a little bit helpful where people were able to step back a little and everyone was working from home. But I still see it. Like yesterday, I was just came from Nashville. I was in Nashville for an insurance conference talking about wellness. And I was in the lounge on my way home, and there was this guy, he was probably like 30, came in all serious with his laptop and set it up and was like, typing away. And then there were these two women who were probably, ish about my age, our age. And they came in and were like, stop working. Like, just stop it. We're going to go get a drink. We're going to just close our laptops and sit over here. And you could tell that it stressed him. He was like, what do you mean? But then eventually he was like, okay, this is nice. And so I honestly think this is a leadership thing.
Yes.
Where we have to promote strong leaders that allow themselves and their team to not be 24/7 hustling, because it just isn't productive. And like you said, Tanya, people burn out. There's this whole burnout issue happening now. So
and I think
stress affects fertility.
Yeah, and that affects
100% it does.
Exactly. Stress and everything else.
It's 100%.
And I think that's where the growth happens, right? Is that when you grow around what do I need to do to be productive? And if that's those are things like delegation and enabling my team and leading by example, all those kinds of things, and you start to transition your own growth into levels of different productivity that you couldn't even imagine, right?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that, and people don't like hearing this, everyone's replaceable.
Yeah.
And it really is just a job. And I think in my first startup, I couldn't reconcile that. It wasn't just a job. It was, I felt like it was like,
Life.
it was all encompassing, right? And I, and then we sold it. It ended. And it was like, okay, well, that's that, right? And so, you just kind of realize that a job is a job. I mean, it's very important to enjoy your job and love your work and all those things, and I do. But it is also just a part of your life, right? There's also your family, your kids, if you have kids, your partner, your hobbies that are equally important.
It's funny because if Sharif is listening to this, I've already said this in one other episode. I'm going to say it again, but I
He's gonna have to come on as a guest, okay? Just say
Yes.
But I regularly say to my team, like, the product will launch whether you kill yourself or not. So do not kill yourself. It is a job. I love my job.
Yeah.
But it is a job.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see anyone on my teams burning out because of it.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay. So why don't we get into some of your other things that, so like, because I also want to hear more about like the future of Flora, and but I think we wanted to talk about you're also, there's a role that you have right now. You're a venture capitalist, is that right? And I will talk about like for women only. Is that?
No, so I'm I not for women only, although one of the things that I'm trying to do is invest in more women. But so that other role is I'm a venture partner with a group called IA Capital. It's a New York based insurtech, fintech VC. Been around for 25 years. It's the longest standing insurtech VC. And I've been working with them for about 4 years. And doing where I operate is that intersection of insurtech and digital health. Awesome. And so very much aligns with what Flora is doing. IA Capital has not invested in Flora yet. But it's what I would say my goal is to hopefully invest in women founders and Canadian founders, good founders in general, but
Right.
Amazing.
And so I feel like the statistics, like you're doubling it, because I think female founders in tech, is it like 5% are female founders? And you now are the female founder of 2. So what was it like? Like, what was it like getting funding? What was that like?
I would say, and now I'm on both sides of that.
Yes,
So that's
yes,
interesting right now. I'm investing, and Flora's also raising money right now. So I feel like I have a bit of an insider track on that. But, I mean, raising money right now for anybody is very hard. Just with the way interest rates are and the performance of existing portfolios, it's tough. And VCs really across sectors are having to reinvest in existing portfolio companies. So they're not deploying a ton of new capital. But I would say from the founder side, it's always hard. I mean, and it's easier this time around, that's for sure, having learned all the lessons. The first time with Viva Metrica, man, did I learn some stuff. I realized that I had no idea what I was talking about. But I mean, I was living, I don't know if you're familiar, but in Palo Alto, Menlo Park, there's a road called Sand Hill Road. And it's where a lot of the really big VCs are. And I was showing up. I was getting, appointments to pitch some of these giant VCs like Khosla and NEA and just big ones. And I was going in there, and in retrospect, oh my gosh, do I realize I didn't know what I was talking about, but learned a lot. Had some of them just be like, you need to go away and figure out what the hell you're talking about before you come back, which is fine. And I did. So I think it's really raising from VCs anyways is a lot around relationships. Is the biggest piece of advice I would give. I wouldn't say impossible, but very close to impossible to cold cold call, cold email VCs and have it, have it go through. Warm introductions are always the best. But again, as a woman or as a founder who's just starting out, you don't have a network like I now have, right? You don't know who to talk to get those introductions. And that's where, like I always say, if you're a founder, you're raising, reach out. I'm happy to do introductions if it makes sense. Because especially for women, I think you mentioned the stat, Tanya, maybe earlier, it's less than 2% of venture funding goes to women, to female founded companies. But if you look at the data, female founded and female led companies outperform male founded companies across the board. And so it's a good investment. But the problem is, I think 98% of VCs are men.
Yes.
And they, and it's in many ways, it's not even their fault, right? Like you're trying to talk to a 35-year-old guy about perimenopause. They're not interested. They're just not.
Yeah.
They don't have any of the background or information about it. And it's just not something they see as a problem.
Well, it's sort of like going to a male gynecologist. Can we just throw that out there and maybe, delete this if you want, Tanya, but let's just say that out there.
Yeah. No, 100%. Well, like, not to go too deep, but like the speculum, the device that's used when you go to the gynecologist, totally designed by men.
Yep.
No one thought about, is this going to be comfortable? Like it's metal, it's freezing, it's harsh, and this is where, the whole issue of femtech is, or not the issue, but the great thing about the emergence of femtech is products being designed by women for women who understand the problem. And the same on the VC side. You're seeing women run funds investing in women.
I love it.
I think there's one thing you said, and the word you used, Christy, was network. And I think that's key. And I love that you use that word, because I think that is part of our new generation and what we bring to the table in this group and in this platform, as well as what we're trying to champion, is really finding your network and finding people that you can refer to your network outside, inside, and connecting women. Let's just be plain, right? I think that's key. That's how we get this advancement. That's how we get the product knowledge, the camaraderie, and help deal with all of those things that we've just talked about, which is your burnout, your shame, your issues, your concerns. Have laughter. I think that's key, right? That's one of the things that you're championing, and kudos to you for doing that, quite honestly.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I would say that probably for me, the biggest value that I bring to pretty much anything I work on is my network. It's all the great people like you that I now know. And honestly, I'll talk to anybody. I get so many emails or things through, not anybody, not through LinkedIn. I can't keep up with my LinkedIn requests, but if it comes through somebody else, I'll talk to them. I'll have a call, especially women founders. If it's just, I'll hear what you're doing. And if I can help you, I'll be helpful. I'll introduce you to somebody, or I'll tell you, actually, this idea isn't great. It's hard to hear, but sometimes you need frank feedback.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So I have a question about the research part of the fertility insurance. I do a lot of reading. I'm sorry, it's Christy, but I read that 80% of hospital treatment goes towards like a lot of women issues, but only 4% of research funding goes to women's issues. So are you having trouble actually getting the actuarial data on fertility and fertility issues because it's just simply not enough there?
It's a great question. So I would love to, we're going to have to do a part 2 to talk about women's health research in general. And there are some amazing women in Calgary that are working on this that aren't necessarily in insurance, but I think you ladies would really love to talk to. There's a lady called Claire with Loop, and then Danica Kelly with My Normative. I don't know if you've met them, but they're doing tons of stuff in the like promotion of women's health research space. So anyways,
Amazing.
shout out to them. But where we're getting the data is clinical data. So thankfully in North America, there are people that have been recording and keeping track of the data related to fertility treatment for as long as fertility treatment's been around. And in the US, there are regulators that oversee that. So CMS is one of them. So they anyways, not to go in the weeds, but there is data to answer your question, Tanya. But you have to know where to find it. And that's a little bit of our secret sauce is I know where to find those things. You know, who the network is one of them. I can reach out to friends I have in clinical research and say, hey, do you know of any data sets? Where do I find this data set? How do I get access to it? So I wouldn't say it's an easy thing to access. And because it's a net new product, we don't have any known insurance data sets because there just aren't any. So we're creating the actuarial and the underwriting models for using clinical data. And I mean, I did a meta-analysis of over 10,000 peer-reviewed papers.
Wow.
To get down to our predictive models, like everything out there really in the world around what predicts infertility. And so that's really our secret sauce is being able to do individual risk selection for fertility.
You got to have a part 2. You got to let us know that's fascinating.
I will say
And period trackers and that data will be to the underwriting eventually. Yeah.
Well, a lot of, so I can't say who it is, but our first go-to-market partner is the largest women's health app in the world.
Nice.
And so, and it's a period tracker. You can maybe guess who it is, but they've been working alongside us since the beginning doing market research.
Amazing. With
their user base, and they have 60 million monthly active users. 10 million in the US. What's that?
So I'm probably one of them, right?
Yeah. So, I'm a user. And so what they found when they did their market research alongside us is they went out to their users who were not trying to conceive. So these are just, younger women or older women doing period tracking and symptoms tracking. And they found that over 50% of those women were interested or concerned with future infertility. And 35% were willing to pay today for some kind of fertility insurance product. So there's definitely a need there. And I love, Tanya, that you called out those apps and trackers, because all of those lifestyle pieces of information feed into this. So, a question earlier about how did my first business track into this business, that's a lot of it is understanding how to things like sleep, physical activity, stress. Stress is a massive one for fertility. I hear stories all the time of women who are trying and they're so stressed. And this happened to me. You're so stressed about it. Up goes your cortisol. It throws everything off, off balance. Then the minute you kind of forget about it and you're like, okay, I'm done trying, bang, women get pregnant.
Yeah.
Because they're not stressed.
Yeah.
So what's next for Flora? Where are we at? And when can we, when is it go to market? Because we just want to help champion it in any way and whatever we can do.
You guys are the best. You gals are the best. So where we're at right now is building the product. Okay. So we're finalizing our risk taker, so our capacity provider, and we are now building our tech stack, which is exciting. We just brought on an amazing female CTO. And so we're building the tech where I'm working on finalizing all of the underwriting models. I'm with an amazing female medical underwriter, and we're looking to launch hopefully late summer in the US and Canada. You know how these timelines go?
Yes,
that's our goal.
Of course.
Yeah. Wanting to launch. So, and we've been doing some interesting testing on Instagram, just through Instagram questionnaires, and we're seeing huge uptake and interest on our wait list. We're getting hundreds of people signing up to the wait list per day.
That's awesome.
And it's in 2 segments. It's in women of childbearing age who are interested themselves, but it's also parents.
I was just gonna say,
Ooh.
It would have been my
Parents
mom
who-
applying that for me.
yeah, I was
well,
was literally just thinking that, and I didn't want to throw that out there because I thought, is that weird? But I'm thinking
No.
it has been on, it is even before this conversation, it has been on my mind for my own daughter. And
Yeah.
I have thought like, yeah, so
Yeah.
interesting parents now taking out that insurance policy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have 2 daughters. They're
Yeah,
too young now, but I mean, I know I had challenges. Pretty
Mhm.
sure my mom did, even though it wasn't diagnosed at the time. There's a chance that they'll need fertility treatment. So I would for sure buy this for them. $15 a month, both
sure.
of them, away you go, you know, happy
Yeah.
graduation present kind of thing. But honestly, and it's women in, you know, the Gen X, elder millennial, whatever it's called now, generation that are thinking about this and also have the money, or at a point in their lives where they have the money that they can buy it for their children. So
Amazing.
super interesting.
Thank you, Christy Lane, for being on our podcast today. If you guys have it, the audience, if you haven't checked out Flora, please check out Flora. I think you can find it on obviously Instagram, like we just said. We'll post the link. If you go ahead, Helen.
I was gonna say all the links will be below.
Okay, all the links will be below. If you don't follow us, please follow us, like, share. This was probably one of my favorites. So Christy, thank you so much. I definitely want you to come back for a part 2. I think there's just so much we didn't even cover, and really excited about your launch this year, whether it's fall, whether it's winter, we'll be there to support you and get that message out. I just think it's amazing.